Good morning, everybody. It's Jenna, and it is Monday morning. I'm wearing my y'all hat today, and I've got my mug today that says "Speak Up," and that's kind of what I'm talking about. This light is shining funnily, and it's because I've got my microphone here that I normally when I do podcasts, and today I'm just using my phone, so I'm just using my AirPods. I wanted to do a video today about why I continue to speak up and say the things that I say. I know that lately I've been posting a lot of posts, which is probably only about, I don't know, maybe 35% of the stuff that I actually see. So, well, for one thing, I had someone ask me yesterday, how do you keep up with all this stuff? And are you just constantly researching online? The answer is no, not anymore. I used to spend a lot of time researching online. I mean, I still research some online, but I don't use Google anymore unless I'm trying to find a business that's close to me. Google can't be trusted for any type of reasonable search. So if you're still using Google to look things up, don't do it. The algorithms and everything are just so messed up. Everybody pays for that. So what I do is I've now basically curated a list of journalists and news outlets I actually use Twitter, that of people that I trust, that I know, that have proven over time that the things that they say are researched and well thought out. And so what I do is I use Twitter as a news feed. I have about 1,200 people that I follow, and some of them are garbage, but I still keep up with them because I want to know what some of the bad takes are, and just some of these articles I find that are just terrible are people that I follow that are just not smart, and just it's insane. But they're people in positions of authority, either at a news organization or college or something like that. So now I have, as much of it as Twitter is a dumpster fire in terms of opinions, and if you post something you're going to get just a ton of bot replies and stuff like that. Not me necessarily, because I don't post a whole lot of anything on there myself, but it's still the best news feed that I've seen, and that includes some of the other ones. I will post all the places that I'm at online. If you're following me on Facebook, you're probably seeing maybe 20% of the things that I actually post, unless you go directly to my page, because Facebook is just as bad as all the rest of them. The reason I post to people on Facebook is because y'all are my community, and y'all know me personally, and you live in the city that I do, most of you. So I want y'all to know what's going on, and I know that the majority of people, I would say probably 99% of the people, do not keep up with politics and news the way that I do. So I post on there because you guys are there, but Facebook, Facebook messes with the algorithms and all that stuff just as badly, if not worse, than all the rest of them do. So if you're wondering I haven't heard anything from Jenna for a while, well, the reason is because Facebook actually has told me on numerous occasions that it's going to move my posts to the end of other people's news feeds. And there might have even been times that you guys have clicked on something that I've shared, and it says, do you want to still hear about things like this? Or do you still want to hear from this person? And you can say yes or no. And if you say no, then it's going to mute me, and you're not going to see the things that I say. So you have to be very deliberate. And even Twitter does that, because if I follow that many people, there's a lot of times I have to go specifically to a person's profile and look to see if they've written anything recently, or I have to subscribe to their Substack or something like that. So it takes, being in this news environment that we're in right now, takes a lot of deliberate, intentional actions. And that's part of the reason that I post, because most people don't have the wherewithal to do that. It's very mentally exhausting, and it's emotionally taxing, and it's just really hard on people. So I share, so that people have a place that they can at least trust that things that I'm sharing are true. This heat has just totally messed with everything on my sinuses. Anyways, so why do I continue to post the things I do? The things that I post, I'm at risk all the time of someone that loves me deciding that day that they're not going to love me anymore because something I post might not be in line with them politically or what they believe. Or maybe they think that something I post is mean, or I don't know. And I run the risk every day of losing friends, losing loved ones out of my life. So why do I still do it? The answer is because to me, there is no other option. Society has become such that I believe 100% that the way that we're going is not good for anyone that lives in a society like this. And so you might hate me today, but you're not going to hate me 6 months from now, because 6 months from now, you're probably going to think she had a point. And you don't see a person that might not agree with me today. Part of the reason they don't agree with some of the things I post is because they don't see the whole picture. They only see a part of the picture. And so when they see the whole picture 6 months from now or a year from now, things start to make sense. And then they realize, wait a second, there was a point there. And that's where a lot of people have come into society, is they were on one side, usually on the progressive side of things, and then realize that society has progressed so far that it's regressing at a massive rate, and that it's not going anyplace good. I'm also a Christian. I've read the Bible. I believe in the Bible wholeheartedly. And the Bible just has shared this story about how society regresses over and over and over again. So if you believe in the Bible, none of this should surprise you. I don't know that we're in the end times. A lot of people think that. I don't know that we are, but I will tell you that this is not the first time that society has come to this place where we're living in just complete moral depravity. People have lost all sense of humanity. Not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people have. They don't respect their fellow man. They don't respect boundaries. They don't respect they don't respect children. They don't respect each other. There's a total lack of fear of consequences for behavior. They get away with anything they want, and so they will. This is nothing new. God has, the story of the Old Testament is exactly the story every 400 years, 200 years, whatever. The nation of Israel would go through an upheaval, and this is what would happen, is that they would turn their backs from God. They would decide that they could do everything themselves. They could decide they could do it better. They start to worship each other. They worship their bodies. They worship the things that they've made. They've thrown out God and all the rules that God gave, and the priests become corrupt and everything. And then all of a sudden it's like they go through this cycle. So none of this should surprise any of us, because it's a tale as old as the Bible is. So the issue is, when do you come to a place where you decide that talking about it and standing up against it is the right thing for you to do? And at what point does the cost of not saying something become more than the cost of saying something? And that's the point that I got to 2 years ago. I've always been an outspoken person. It's not that I haven't been outspoken, but there's certain issues that maybe I would avoid, or I don't even know if that's true about me, but there are news stories and stuff that I would intentionally not share because either I didn't have enough information about the source itself or the topic itself, where I wasn't ready to deal with the cost of what that might cost me. So I just kind of kept it to myself until it got to the point where I couldn't tell anymore. One of those things is this gender ideology stuff. I stayed away from this topic for a while because I was learning more about it. I had to become an expert in gender ideology in order to be able to talk about it. And I spent a good year learning about where it came from, why it's happening, and then I started to share it because now that I know the truth, the cost of not saying anything is far more than the cost of saying something. So if you're kind of sitting there going, I don't know where my line is, or I'm not this type of person that would speak out, I don't know when that's supposed to happen, when I'm supposed to do that, there comes a point where you draw a line in the sand. Maybe it's a mental line, and you say to yourself, if we cross this line as society, that's when the cost of not saying anything is more than the cost of saying something. And when you get to that place, you tell God, I will not go back. And I told God that. God and I had a deal when I started all this. I don't know where this obsession with news came from because I was never obsessed with news ever before 2 years ago. And suddenly it was like I couldn't stop reading. And God almost just spurred me on, and he just kept going, you need to learn more, you need to learn more. And it was because he was always telling me, you can consume this information and then tell other people about it. So you can consume it and you can break it down into little bites where people understand what's happening and then explain it to people. And I also knew that I had a talent for it. I'm not just going to take in this information and then put it back out in some kind of a stupid meme and that boils everything down to some silly meme. When I put it back out, it's full of data, and people always say to me, I know that when you post stuff, you've actually thought through why you think this way. It's not like you're just saying this because you are following what other people have to say. In fact, I pride myself in not doing that. And so, God and I, like I said, we had this agreement, and I said, okay, I'll continue to do this as long as you tell me that it's valuable to other people, and he just put inside of me this fire. I don't know how else to explain it. This fire to just understand what was going on in the world. And ever since then, it's like I can't turn around and go back. I've seen too many things now. And it's like God was preparing me to break the chains of loyalty that I had to all of these institutions and all of these organizations, and, even to people, to people that I had, epitomized for a long time. God needed to break all that loyalty to me so that I could see things for what they are. And that is a biblical concept. If you look at just yesterday in Sunday school, we were talking about King Ahaz, who is the evil king. And then after King Ahaz, his son Hezekiah was a good king. He followed in line with David, and he was a very good king. He followed what God said to do. And, in the period of the kings in the nations of Israel and Judah, there was way more evil kings than there were good kings. Ahaz was probably one of the most evil, if not the most evil. And, what had happened in society, this is 2 Kings 16, and also in 2 Chronicles 29. So it's the same story of Hezekiah right after Ahaz. And what happened is that the nation of Israel had become so evil that Was it Israel or was it Judah? It was Judah. It was Judah. Anyway, Ahaz had done so many evil things that society and the people in in Judah, were ready for a purge of all of this evil nonsense. Because they saw how bad society had actually become when they just did it all themselves. And so Hezekiah goes in and he basically destroys all their idols. And one of those things that he destroys is Moses' staff with the snake on top. This is the same medical symbol that we see of the snake, on the medical symbol. But Moses had made that back in the books of law and in the Old Testament, the beginning of the Old Testament. He had made that because God had told him to. But now people had been worshiping that as an idol. And Hezekiah, who was a good king, destroyed it. And the point that I made in Sunday school was God wants to destroy everything that keeps you in chains. And God wants to destroy everything where your loyalty is more to that thing than to God. Even things that he makes. Even things that he has said to make. He will say, if you're going to make it into an idol, even if it's something that I made, we're still going to destroy it. The temple is a prime example of that. They made the temple to house the presence of God with the Ark of the Covenant. They made the temple first with Solomon, then the temple was destroyed. Then they made the temple again in the time of Jesus Christ after they came back from Babylonian exile. They made the temple again, and God destroyed the temple a second time. So even a temple to God is destroyed if you pervert it and corrupt it and it becomes an idol to you. So even things that are good can become idols. And my point is that once I started to see and pay attention to all the news and to pay attention to everything that was going on, I realized that myself personally, I had made idols out of pretty much everything that I thought, or not even idols, I don't want to say idols. I had grown a loyalty to so many things and to people. And that loyalty was so strong that I could not see the truth about it. And once God said, you need to see, you need to read, you need to study all this stuff, everything in my mind, he just started disconnecting all this loyalty that I had to government entities, to what I'd been taught about public school education, and what I'd been taught about the church as an institution, and leaders that I thought were the best leaders we ever had. I realized, they weren't always the best leaders. And suddenly it was like God replaced all this loyalty to all that with just loyalty to him and loyalty to Jesus Christ. And then all of a sudden it's like I couldn't not say anything about the things that I was saying. And it was very freeing. It was very, very freeing. I'm not comparing myself to Paul in any way, shape, or form, but I almost see why Paul couldn't, once he saw Jesus Christ on that road, and once it changed him, the option was never to go back. The option was never to not talk about Jesus Christ and what Jesus Christ could do for you. That was never an option for Paul. No matter how many times he was imprisoned, no matter how much people hated him, no matter how many people ran him out of town, no matter how much he had to go talk to government officials because he was in trouble yet again, no matter how many times that he had to have these conversations where he would debate people and be tired and didn't want to do it, no matter how many times he had to start a new church and do all this stuff, it didn't matter. And that's when he talks about running the race and not getting tired and doing it to the end. This is what he's talking about. Because once you see Jesus Christ for what it is, for what he is and what he can do, and once you see the truth of what the world looks like without Jesus Christ, and once you see the depravity and the human, what our human nature does to each other, once you see that, really see it, You can't not see it ever again. And the option is talk about it or literally die inside. And that's what he talks about in the New Testament numerous times. And I get it now. I get what that feels like, because my heart is broken every day for our world. But I also have 100% hope that the answer to every problem we have is Jesus Christ. Every single problem is Jesus Christ. And if we were actually to read our Bibles and spend time in the Word and understand what God is saying in the Bible, if we were to actually have that Bible literacy and commit ourselves to being biblically literate, you would not be able to stop talking about the depravity and what the answer to the depravity is, and that's Jesus Christ. You wouldn't. And I don't know how to explain that to you other than just do it, because I'm there. And nothing in this world matters to me in terms of what I could lose, because what I could gain is so much more, so much better than what I can lose. And basically every day when I post stuff, I live, I don't want to say in a fear, but I mean, there's always, somebody could report me to take my license away, my real estate license away. I could lose a client because they decide that I'm too conservative or too whatever. I don't know, whatever they'd want to say. I run the risk of some very close-minded people calling me names, which they have. Not very many, but some of them do. I run the risk of being very obnoxious. You know, I know that there's a lot of times I post so many things and people are like, oh my gosh, stop. Like, it's too much. But none of that matters as much as what it would cost me to say nothing. And the gain, what I would gain is far more than what I would lose. And Paul talks about that too. What is it? What is it to gain the world if you lose your soul? You know, it's like, I can't go back to not knowing what I know. And the world, I mean, Christians are going to have to figure out, we are to a place where it's becoming impossible for you to live in society and keep your head in the sand and not say anything. And I've gotten to the place, and I'll just be honest with you, I've gotten to the place where I'm becoming very frustrated with people who choose to ignore what's happening and pretend like it's not as bad as it is, because it's too hard. And I get it. It's too hard. You know, I have this argument a lot with people because they'll tell me people just want to live their lives. They don't want to be bothered. They just want to live their lives and go to work and live with their kids. And I agree 100%. I think that's what most people do want to do, is they do just want to live their lives and enjoy their families. And not have to worry. My dog is whining. I see you. You're kind of interrupting my video there, sister. My poor dog. She can't even hardly hear anymore. My little 13-and-a-half-year-old. Anyways, most people do just want to be left alone. We're not to... You don't have that luxury anymore. We don't live in a society where you have that luxury. This is the problem, okay? This is the problem. We have committed ourselves to the comfort for far too long, and now we're having to pay the piper. If we would have started talking about this or really started pushing back on this several years ago when we saw it happening, and instead of running away, we might have been in a place now where you could still continue to live your freedom and do all that stuff. But we didn't do that because we were too committed to our freedom and to our comfort then. I'll be the first one to say, you know, I took my freedom for granted. I took this country for granted. And I just assumed that it was going to always be like that. And it was just going to always be a land of the free, and I could do whatever I wanted. And, you know, it was a Christian nation, and I was never going to be persecuted here for being a Christian. People, but we're not there anymore. We're just not. I don't care if you live in Texas, you live in DFW. I don't care that you live in DFW. This has pervaded everything. It's perverted everything. And Europe is figuring it out. Europe is pushing back against a lot more than we are. Now, I will say that our government and the way that our society is set up in the Constitution, with the states having power like they do, is very unique throughout the entire world. No other country is set up the way that we are. So there are a lot of things that we are protected against because of our Constitution. But I will tell you, there are people every day that are trying to destroy that Constitution, because if they destroy that Constitution, then you can say goodbye to pretty much life as we know it. And so it's gotten to that point. So this idea that you can just live your life and be free and just ignore everything and drive down the street and pretend like everything's fine and go on trips and everything is, hunky-dory and you don't have to worry about it, that time has passed. We're past that point. And I hate to be a Chicken Little about it, but it's the truth. Prophets in the Old Testament warned people repeatedly, and they were ignored until the time came and they said, oh, okay, I guess we should have listened to someone on the way to Babylonian exile. We should have listened when God kept telling us that he was going to destroy the nation. We're here. I had someone the other day post that they, what did they say? I trust that someone will tell me if the world is falling apart. Other than that, I don't want to know what's going on. I just, the news is all just fake and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, the news is fake in a lot of ways. But okay, the world is falling apart. I'm telling you that the world is falling apart. I don't know what else you need to hear to take that seriously. When I look around and I see people just flitting around as though everything is fine and nobody's paying attention or saying anything, it's concerning to me. It's very concerning to me. It's frustrating to me. And this is not just Christians. This is just regular everyday people. This is people in the LGBTQ community that are watching people just use this community to destroy children. And, I have a lot of respect for people within that community that are standing up to a lot of that corruption. I have a lot of respect for the people in academia that are standing up to what's going on in academia. Public school education, college education, it's corrupted. It's just corrupted, and it might be corrupted beyond all repair. I don't know. It depends on how much teachers want to save it. Some of our churches are damaged beyond all repair. They've allowed themselves to become, for progressives to take over. They have completely and totally perverted the word of God. They're making a mockery of God. There's some of these churches in the United States that I'm like, I wouldn't be close to you with a 10-foot pole because God's going to strike you down. I mean, the things that I'm seeing are just astonishing. In the name of inclusion and empathy and compassion and all this stuff, cities have allowed themselves to become hotbeds of drug use and addiction and violence and moral depravity and prostitution and all acts of horrible things to each other. They've allowed that. And God allows all that. God allows you to live in the situation that you have begged him to live in. And so some of these cities, and even in the United States, what he's allowing is for all our hearts to be hardened to the point that we see where it's going. This has happened repeatedly over time. I think about the Pharaoh in Egypt, and when God was bringing the Hebrews out of slavery in Exodus, there was 12 different plagues that God sent, and every time that he would send a plague, the Pharaoh would either decide he was going to let them go, and then it would say Pharaoh hardened his heart, or it would say God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So he would get to a place where he would say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, and then he would change his mind. And this happened repeatedly, over and over and over again. So go back and read this story because this is interesting. Um, either Pharaoh hardened his own heart or God hardened his heart. And basically what that meant is, it just was the callous of, sometimes people just do stuff and you're like, why are you doing that? That's just mean. It doesn't make any sense. Well, that's what this looks like. Your heart gets hard and you just decide that you don't care. You don't care if what you're doing hurts other people. You're just going to do it anyways. So God repeatedly did that, or the Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And the reason that happened was because if you go back and read that story, the other part of it is the Egyptians were watching all this happen too. So you have the Hebrews that were trying to get out. Then you had Moses. Then you had the Pharaoh. Then you had the Pharaoh's, all the different ministers and the Pharaoh's, cabinet or whatever. But you also had the Egyptians. Okay. So the Egyptians were also watching the Hebrews that had lived among these Hebrews for 400 years. So they were also watching the Pharaoh get struck down with their nation was getting struck down with all these plagues. And they were watching the Pharaoh not only keep the Hebrews in slavery, but he was also causing the Egyptians to suffer too. So when you turn the river red with blood, and when you kill half the cattle, and when you send in the gnats that destroy your livestock, and there's all these things that happen. The last step was to kill the firstborn sons of all of the Egyptians. And the Egyptians were watching the Pharaoh do this. And they were like, you're going to take us down with you, is what's going to happen. It's cutting off the nose to spite your face. You're going to take this entire country down because you are so stubborn that you won't let God. You are going to say no to God. So in the process of hardening the Pharaoh's hearts, the Egyptians also had to live through all that suffering. And in the process of that, where's my Bible? I should totally get this out and read this part. In the process of that, they ended up feeling so sorry for the Hebrews that when the Hebrews left is when they gave them all their stuff. How did the Hebrews get into the desert and have all the things that they had? Like, we don't ask questions like that. They had gold, they had things, they were slaves. How did they end up with all the stuff in the desert? Because the Egyptians gave it to them. Because in the process of watching the Pharaoh's heart be hardened, it was changing the Egyptians too. This is what we're dealing with in this country right now, okay? The hearts are hardened of our leaders, a lot of the leaders. They have their blinders on. They are in denial. When you look at them and you think, nothing you're doing is making any sense. Like, why would you say something like that? That is a lie. Or why would you say that? That doesn't make any sense. When you're watching them make these decisions about like climate change and stuff, as Americans are suffering, as they are going bankrupt, as they can't afford to get to work, and they still continue to make these choices that make no sense. This is all part of God's plan, because you won't be able to see your leaders for what they are if you can't see how far they are going to let you fall for their own pride and their own stubbornness and their own power to maintain their power. They are not willing to let it go. So God's saying, okay, we're going to harden these people's hearts, and you're going to see just how bad it's going to get. And it's not anywhere close to how bad it's going to get. So, but God has to do this if he's going to change our hearts at all, because there are even some Christians that just don't want to see how bad things are actually getting. And it's like, that's part of the reason I show you the things that I do. And I will tell you, things have gone off the rails in the last month. I have been posting news articles now for 2 years? I mean, to the extent that I've been doing this, the last month, some of these stories are out of control. Yesterday, I posted about a church bishop that was robbed in the middle of a sermon. In the middle of a sermon in Brooklyn, New York, these people just walked into church and robbed everybody and just walked right back out. That's insane. I mean, yes, we have had shooters that have gone in. That's another story that's gotten insane. The level of shooters that we have. These people that are just going in and killing other people for zero reason whatsoever. But a whole nother level and a whole nother part of this is just being able to rob other people of their stuff with zero, like as he's preaching a sermon in church. The story about these teachers that are in some of these places that are getting so emboldened to, that teacher that I posted where his every single inch of his wall was rainbow pride. And that he thinks any of that has anything to do with teaching high school students about academics, even art. What does that have to do with art? Nothing. Zero. Nothing. Imagine there are some people that see that and don't think it's that big of a deal. Now imagine that art teacher had every square inch of his entire classroom covered in crosses and Bible verses and pictures of prophets, and he turned his room into a temple. That's the equivalent, and they would be outraged if they saw that. But when we see an explosion of all of this rainbow stuff in a public school classroom where taxpayers are paying for that, it's like we still just kind of put it off as though it's no big deal. But that is a very blatant example of where this is all going. It's not stopping. It's not stopping. The freight train has left the station and the momentum is there. And so people are just going to get more and more stupid about the things that they're getting very emboldened to have no consequences. When all those medical students walked out yesterday, they were at a keynote speech in University of Michigan. These are medical students. And because the keynote speaker has spoken out against abortion, and she comes and speaks about something that's not even about abortion, these medical students got up in the middle of her speech and walked out. That's where we're at, is teaching students, going to college so that they can learn to become political activists. And these are going to be our doctors of tomorrow. And it's stuff like that makes me go, I don't believe in universal medicine anymore. Because if the option is that everybody has access to medical care, but it's the medical care that's been perverted and corrupted the way that I've seen it, I would much rather us go back to where we were in the 1800s and, let's just have a neighborhood and community doctor that learns from the person that took his place, and we can just learn how to take care of our community ourselves and not have to rely on all this big medical stuff, because it's become so corrupted. I can't even, it's just shocking to me. And if the choice is everybody gets medical care, but the medical care that you get is that you have to mandate that 12-year-old girls get their breasts cut off because they decide one day that they're not a girl anymore, so that pharmaceutical companies can make a bunch of money off of the surgery and off of the nonstop, the lifelong medication that child is going to be on? Absolutely not. I'm to the point, I'm ready for all of it to fail, because, and it needs to fail, at least in our brains. It needs to fail. You need to disconnect yourself from all the stuff that you think you know and reconnect it to the truth and the Word of God. Because that Bible, people say all the time that the Bible is, it's old, it doesn't apply anymore. That is 100% not true. Human beings have not changed. Over all this time, we have not changed. People that would describe themselves as progressive live in this world where they see that if everyone would just do all these things that they say, then we could live in this utopian society that they think exists or could exist if everybody just does it. That utopia is never going to happen until Jesus Christ comes back and brings it with him at the end of the world, whenever that might be. But if there's anything that it's proven, is that human beings have been here for thousands of years and we have not changed. I don't care what technology we have now. I don't care what. We have not changed. You can go through and read the Bible, and you can read the prophets. Read Isaiah, where he talks about what Israel has become. There's times that Israel has become, and he talks about how you have given yourselves away to all moral depravity, and you have worshipped your own bodies, and you have started sacrificing children to your cause. We have not changed. Human beings have not changed. So read the Bible. The Bible is probably one of the most amazingly progressive documents. If you're really talking about how to progress society, but the Bible was written by people who were far ahead. They didn't even realize how far ahead psychologically they were. They didn't realize how much that they understood the human nature, and that's because God infused His knowledge into what they wrote. But the observations of human nature that are in the Bible are nowhere to be found anywhere else. So read it, because you'll see exactly that people don't change. People don't change. The only way that people change is if Jesus Christ comes into their heart, and they ask Jesus Christ into their heart, and they realize that they can't do it themselves, and that their own human nature is nothing but sin, and that Jesus Christ is the only one that is going to break them out of that sin and is going to change their hearts. That is the only thing that changes people fundamentally. Everything, we just continue to repeat the same cycles over and over again. And so I guess, well, I've spent 40 minutes now going on this tangent. If you're still with me, get to the place. If there's one thing I can say today, it's commit yourself to reading the Bible. And I mean reading it. I don't mean just reading certain verses to see what God can teach you out of them. I mean actually reading all the Bible and understanding what the Bible says and why it says the things that it says, and who the authors were, who they were writing to, when they were writing, what time period. Understand, but read the Bible as though you're reading a book that you're trying to understand and write a report about. That's number one. God will speak to you through that. Stop reading the Bible as though the answer is that you're trying to get the Holy Spirit to speak to you. That's not why you read the Bible. You read the Bible to understand what God's saying. You read the Bible to understand history. You read the Bible to understand God's presence. God's character. You read the Bible to understand Jesus' character. You read the Bible to understand what has happened before you, so that you don't repeat the same mistakes again. You read the Bible to see how God can change society and can change your heart. And while you're reading the Bible and while you're studying the Bible, God will speak to you and He will change your heart. It's happened to me. So stop thinking you need an epiphany every time you read the Bible. Sometimes the epiphany is what you've learned from the Bible, not what God is infusing into your life about what you need to change about yourself tomorrow. I've learned a tremendous amount just about the historical parts of the Bible and the battles that have happened in it. It's a tremendous book. So number one, commit yourself to reading the Bible. Number two, pray to God to give you your boundary, your line. Say, God, I need to know what my line is. I need you to tell me what my line is. And if society crosses that line, then I promise you that I will start speaking up. Actually, I think that you should probably pray to have the courage to start speaking up right now, because we're to that point. But if you're not ready, if you keep telling yourself, I'm not an extrovert like Jenna. I'm not outspoken like Jenna. I'm not, fearless like Jenna. I'm not fearless. I'm not all those things. So that's just not me. That's just not me. Enough of that. God's called all of us to be bold. God's called all of us to be courageous. There are things that I do all the time that are outside of my own tendencies. I do it because God tells me to, not because I want to, not because it's comfortable for me. We should all be to that place. And the only way that we're going to change things is if we all start doing that. We have got to start doing that. So pray that God gives you that boldness of character, that courage, and that He infuses you with that boldness and with that, and to start being engaged in the culture again. Our tendency to run away because culture gets too dark. Well, that's part of the reason why culture just keeps getting dark, because we're run out of places and we decide the problem is bigger than God. Absolutely not. God is bigger than all these problems. And God can do a lot of stuff if we give Him the ability to do so. But we have to act too. I could go off on a whole different thing, but this is what I'll say. There are covenants that God makes with us that are unconditional covenants. No matter what we do, God's going to do what He says He's going to do. An unconditional covenant would be God will send Jesus Christ back, and there will come a time when Jesus will reign on earth again. And, that's a covenant that no matter what we do, that's going to happen. there are conditional covenants that God makes with us, where we have to do our part. And so, no, you don't have to perform services to be able to go to heaven. Once you understand that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light, you're gonna live with him for eternity. That's the goal. I mean, that's the promise. But God does tell you that there's things that you have to do, that he commands you to do. And part of that is speaking truth. Part of it is, and the truth that I'm speaking of is not what sins are bad. The truth I'm speaking of is Jesus Christ is the answer for our problems. And Jesus Christ is the answer for your problem. And Jesus Christ is there to help you through this. That life is not just roses and sunshine all the time, that you need help. That is the truth I'm speaking of. I'm also speaking, the truth is, without Jesus Christ, without God in society will become depraved. It already is there. So if you're going to keep pushing God out of society, God will leave, and we will be left with what we are experiencing now. Pain, suffering, depravity that we've never seen, a lack of humanity. All these things are what God says. If you continue to push me out, this is what's going to happen. So that's where we're at right now. So just commit yourself to that. There is hope, y'all. Like, I read the news every day, more than anybody I know. And I have more hope than probably anybody that I know. I am more optimistic about where we could go in society. I'm more optimistic about where we are, where we could go. I have so much faith that people of God are going to stand up and do the right thing. I see it every day. The people that I'm just so surprised at the people I see. It's not even just Christians. It's not believers. It's people that are not believers that have now become Christians. And they're like, I see everything now so much clearly. And they are just, they will not stop. And I'm not going to stop either. So go have a great Monday, you guys. And I'm going to keep posting news because I think that it helps people to see how bad things are getting. But it also, there's hope. We have the answer. The answer is Jesus Christ. And we just need to tell people about that. So have a great Monday. Bye.